The life expectancy of an African-American child, of a black child, in '78 was 5 years shorter than a white child. In 2003, this is the last year that I can find the statistics for, it's 6 years shorter. 78, infant mortality for blacks, twice that of whites. 2003, slightly more than twice that of whites. Black families below the poverty line, 4 times that of whites in '78, unchanged in 2003. Unemployment among black adults, twice that of whites, unchanged in 2003. On the other hand, when you look at, so that may be a snapshot of the majority of people, for, which would include working class people. On the other hand, when you look at white collar folks, the lawyers and judges, 400%, almost a 500% increase in African Americans, from 1.5 to 5.1%. Physicians more than doubled, from 2 to 5.6%. Engineers, almost a 5-fold increase, 1.1 to 5.5. I guess that is a 5-fold increase, 500%. And college and university professors, 2.6 to 6.1. Now these are still, even these higher numbers are still below the proportion within the population.
That's right.
So, looking at these numbers, let me ask you first, Hilary, does this mean that, in particular, the first 4 sets that I gave you, does it mean affirmative action has failed, that it hasn't been done right, or does the second set of numbers show that it's worked, but some, I don't get it.
Well, keep in mind, affirmative action in our country addresses issues of employment, contracting, and admissions into colleges and universities. Those are the 3 areas. So if you look at the challenges in the African-American community, certainly those first numbers are very helpful. Everything from the infant mortality rate, black poverty, the black African-American community poverty rate, and other concerns show that we start out at a major deficit. But what you'll see looking from '78 to 2003 is because of equal opportunity programs like affirmative action that allow those to be able to show they have the ability to be successful in our society, to matriculate through our colleges and universities, to be admitted in the first place, to be considered for hiring, or even to get that government contract. We see that without affirmative action, without that kind of equal opportunity program, we would have gone nowhere. So there has been improvement. But as you pointed out, we've still not reached parity in the society. 5.1% of African Americans are the doctors within our society. African Americans make up over 13% of the national population. 5.6% of the physicians, again, over 13% of the population, and on and on. So clearly, we've seen improvement because of important programs like this, but we haven't gone far enough.
So Horace, are we seeing the evidence of affirmative action here in your mind, or are we seeing something else? Is there?
Well,
or both?
When you look at these stats, what you see is, particularly the life expectancy, the infant mortality rate, is problems for which affirmative action is not going to be a solution for. There are issues that face our inner city communities that we need to be looking at, comprehensive solutions, and those don't have much to do with whether or not you're going to get into a top quality medical school or not. Many of these people are being left behind, and affirmative action as a program isn't going to be able to address those. If we continue to hide behind the affirmative action resolution tool, then these problems, which are going on and continue, are going to not get addressed.
Well, these are problems of poverty and class more than race, aren't they, in many ways?
Well, it's both.
Well, I don't think it's a race-based problem that the life expectancy of a black child is such lower than it is among other groups.
My guess is, though,
if we
compared Appalachian children, who are overwhelmingly white, if we compared Appalachian children to the U.S. average, to the U.S. white average, that we'd see probably numbers very similar to what we're seeing with African-American kids.
Well, and keep in mind that affirmative action isn't limited to just African-Americans. Affirmative action applies to everyone. So quite frankly, even if you had someone who was white and was discriminated against on their job, affirmative action is a very useful tool to make sure that white Americans are taken care of as well. If we look at some white ethnic groups, you talk about Appalachians, that's certainly one of the areas. There was a group of white ethnics in Louisiana, as a matter of fact, the result of a lawsuit in which they were actually locked out of opportunity as well. It was the affirmative action program that allowed those white ethnics to also be able to become part of the mainstream of the society. It's all about opportunity.
But Horace, you're arguing against affirmative action.
Oh, enthusiastically so.
Why?
You point out Appalachian children. They have systemic problems. There are many pockets of poverty in America. An affirmative action program really does the one thing that we should avoid whenever possible. It asks the color of the individual and then says that is the basis for the response.
But doesn't society do that?
We can never teach society that race is never the answer for government programs if government programs rely on race.
But when you look at the 4 states that have passed the same legislation that just passed in Arizona, and you look at the numbers 2 years before the law passed and a year after, what you see is the percentage of African Americans being admitted to their universities has fallen by, in some cases, over 400%, fourfold.
That's right.
The number of African Americans who are moving through, there's a whole series. I'm sorry, I don't have the statistics.
The matriculation rate among black Americans has been a travesty since affirmative action.
But in those 4 states,
because
it
we
got
have
worse.
been bringing people, we've been bringing people forward and placing them in institutions that they haven't been already prepared for. See, affirmative action ignores that there is a foundation that needs to be laid and addressed. And instead, it just simply says, you are skin color X and you're going to get this benefit.
So you're saying deal first with poverty.
Yes, you've got to deal with the underlying challenges.
Let me first say I strongly disagree with that assessment. It suggests that for some reason those who are able to take advantage of affirmative action aren't prepared. Affirmative action also does not allow those who are less prepared to actually get a position over those who are more prepared because of race. That is illegal. So it is a misnomer to suggest somehow affirmative action allows just anyone to get into the pipeline. It doesn't. It just helps knock down the barriers that prevent opportunity for those who are prepared. Don't forget, in our society, regardless of your race, regardless of your preparation, we were locked out of opportunities to even stay in hotels if we wanted to because of race.
Right up until a generation.
Oh, absolutely. So to suggest that that's not the case, if we look at this data, we see real improvement.
Which raises an issue of human nature.
Sure.
If I can just ask you both this question.
This is my concern, and this is why every single time you see these measures being put forward, the public sides with eliminating affirmative action. We are not addressing, we are not, you look at the statistics, you're seeing black, whites, Latinos, Asians. There are sizable numbers of people who are going into the voting poll when they're asked this question and they are rejecting it. We are not answering the questions. What are the real systemic problems facing people of color and poverty in
I don't
America?
disagree with you on that final point. And although I think that there's a place for affirmative action, but let me ask the larger question in the 2 minutes or so we have left here. Our society has resegregated in the last decade or so. And it's not been promoted by government policy. We're racially more segregated than we were a decade and a half ago.
I don't agree with that. I see more interracial dating and more interracial marriage, more socializing across. You look at
but when
a typical
when you look at
users.
breakouts of cities, I mean,
you're measuring only where we live.
But
I understand, but my question is there an element of human nature here of people like to hang out with people that they feel are...
And that's what I'm saying. We're seeing increasingly. You go to the Redskins game, you're going to see a substantial number of the diversity of America.
But when that, I like to hang out with my friends or folks, whatever, turns into, and therefore I'm going to lock these guys out, then it goes from being human nature to being a crime, shouldn't it?
And it is a crime to say to a person, and so how do we respond to the crime of saying to a person you can't have opportunity because of your race by giving another person opportunity precisely because of their race?
Well, it's about opportunity. You're right. The segregation that we're seeing expanding really is economic segregation.
It is.
Don't forget, you can only live in certain communities if you can afford to buy in. And if we look at things like the unemployment rate, clearly across racial lines, there's a disparate impact. African Americans are unemployed.
I think we're seeing class segregation in the United States
Class being driven by economics as well.
Even setting aside race.
It's all driven by education, of course. We have our schools, our public schools are more segregated now than they were in the 1970s.
Yeah, that was the index that I saw.
So there are a number of things that are challenging for us along those lines that we have to certainly take on. Equal opportunity programs like affirmative action, when properly administered, are not quotas. They are flexible goals and timetables saying we as a society choose to be integrated. We want to make sure we give everyone an opportunity to succeed in our society.
So you're saying tweak the programs, you're saying deal with the
Stop calling
underlying
the people of Arizona
program.
racist, because they are more willing to have a conversation
Okay, we have to
about the underlying
we have to wrap
problems.
it up, but I